Okay, so, well, to start with, I just wanted to mention that I skipped the morning sessions, and I did it specifically because I was wanting to clear my mind. And I was just chatting to my colleague, and she was saying, don't talk about the war. And then she was saying, I was like, okay, can't talk about that. Don't talk about consensus forecast. Don't talk about improving demand forecast. And don't talk about, don't talk about how it's going to solve all your problems in terms of inventory. So, okay, I'll scratch those off. The thing I want to talk about is a few quotes to begin with. And the first one is a quote from McKinsey around, and this is from this year, where we found out that 73% of companies interviewed are still using spreadsheets, Excel, for a portion, exactly as you're saying, PowerPoint. Spreadsheets as part of their supply chain planning process. Now, I can say that my first S&OP process that I implemented was, I can go back at the turn of the century, 2000, 20 years ago. I implemented my first S&OP process using Excel. And it was a disaster. It was very, very difficult. Most of the time, the meetings that we were having, half of the meeting was discussing whose numbers are correct. Discussing, did you include those numbers in your spreadsheet? Is your spreadsheet calculation correct? I recall a situation where an entire quarter went by before I realized that there was an error in my formula, which was inflating our stocks by like 20%. And we kept running out of stock. So it's always going to be a challenge. Now, I was hoping that by the time we got to this point, that people would have stopped using Excel and PowerPoint. It hasn't happened. It still hasn't happened. Now, the other challenge we have is that, and this is a quote from Oliver White, one of the crowds that first came up with the concept of S&OP back in the 80s. They indicate that 60% of the people they interviewed have no link between the consensus forecast, which we said we don't want to talk about, and their weekly execution plan. So they go through the process, having an S&OP meeting, where they get everything right, get all the right people in the room, come up with a consensus forecast, and then they don't execute it. So that doesn't help matters. So there's a problem between how we execute. The next challenge, which is around AI and machine learning, and the question is, why is this a challenge to S&OP? Well, it's a disruptor of S&OP, and it's going to be something that's going to change the way we do S&OP and potentially in the future do away with S&OP. So, and I click. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I won't talk about the war. I'll talk about disruptions. So what do disruptions do? Disruptions are changing the way demand happens, the way supply happens. It's impacting how predictable it is going to be for demand and supply. Now, there are a lot of things impacting. So that's one thing is going to be the disruptions. How do I address that? I can address it either by improving my process or increasing my stock. Now, a lot of people have been doing that. They've been increasing their inventory to account for those fluctuations in supply and demand. The reason you keep inventory in the first place is as a buffer against disruptions in supply and demand. Now, if you can increase your inventory, yes, you can, but a lot of companies have been unable to do that because of the disruptions in supply. They've been unable to do that. So the challenge we have is that disruptions are becoming more and more intense, but the process, with the support of Excel, amongst other things, has remained rather static. So there's been this gap in terms of how can I actually achieve what I need to achieve. So tied to that, in terms of how do I increase or improve my process, one thing we need to consider is that there is a maturity model with regards to sales and operation planning. And a lot of companies are still stuck with this balancing supply and demand, or if they have got to S&OP, they are unable to move that process forward. And that is because of a lack of process improvement, a lack of supportive software. So what are the trends that I'm seeing? I'm seeing the emergence of technology, so things like AI, machine learning, that are disrupting the sales and operation planning process, disrupting the way people do things, but also improving it. Because of all these fluctuations in supply and demand, we are now having to depend more on machine learning and AI to improve our demand and supply planning process. Next one is the convergence of planning and execution. So S&OP and IBP should be forward-looking. It should be focused on what's happening in the next few years, not the next quarter. And what we're finding is that more and more companies, because of all these disruptions, are spending their entire S&OP meetings focusing on what's happening in the next month or the next quarter. How can I address the backlog I have right now? So what we need to do is insert that additional S&OE, or as Oliver White calls it, tactical planning process in between. Let S&OP focus on where it needs to focus, which is more strategic, but actually have a process in between that's supporting the execution of your plan. And then the next thing is this the concept of multi-tier collaboration and visibility. Now, in a recent study that McKinsey did, different from the one I was mentioning earlier, but still a recent study from 2022, they were indicating that in 2021, actually, when they interviewed the companies, 59% had no visibility beyond tier 1. So they were looking at their current supply chain and tier 1. Now, since they've done the new study again for 2022, it's now dropped to 45%, but it still means that there are many companies that are not looking at what's beyond their current supplies, their tier 2 supplies. Now, that's where a lot of the risk is sitting. And that was one of the things that we need to improve. Now, since I am from Oracle, I'm going to talk about software as well. So let's go a bit into what we're doing to support that. So in terms of machine learning and AI, there are 3 things that we're doing. One of them is around predictive maintenance. So in your S&OP process, to be able to have machine learning and using a digital twin to understand when I'm committing to the capacity that I'm committing to, can that resource that I'm using support that? So using concepts like digital twin, understanding the maintenance schedules, understanding when that resource is likely to fail, and then having a planning advisor tell you, you're using that resource, and there's an 80% chance that that's going to fail based on machine learning. New product introductions. So within my S&OP process, one of the big things that we do is include product marketing. And using machine learning, we're able to analyze the attributes of the product we're about to launch, compare that with our current install base of products, and then indicate the likelihood of success. What is the forecast likely going to be for that launch, and when is the best time to launch it? And then I have to include predicting my forecast because it's something we do in S&OP. But yeah, we're not going to depend completely on that. But then also using machine learning to improve my forecast accuracy. So not only using concepts like best fit, but actually blending the forecasting algorithms I have in place to actually come up with the best forecast I can possibly come up with. I did click. I will try again. Maybe I have to go closer. There we go. Okay, so in terms of bringing together my planning with my execution, including that S&OE layer, and actually taking advantage of software to take my monthly forecast and bring it into a weekly planning forecast. So one of the challenges you have with Excel is that when you're planning in calendar months, you now have to take your forecast that you've now agreed and bring it into either a 445 or 454 or something. But we plan in weeks, we don't plan in calendar months. So that's always going to be a challenge. So you need to have software that can actually take a calendar month forecast and then accurately bring it into a weekly planning forecast so that you can execute, drill down to the detail, and then back up to the top again, back up to the aggregate level. Backlog management, I mentioned it earlier. One of the challenges that we're seeing a lot with customers is we talk to them about S&OP, and they say, well, S&OP is great, but help me now, I've got a backlog. What can I do to solve that backlog? So using business rules to prioritize where we give our scarce products to, so giving it to the customers the customers that are the most profitable, the ones that have the bigger penalty clauses, for example. But how do I get out of the hole that I'm in right now in order to solve that problem? And then things like rapid segment analysis. Now, ideally what you're wanting to do is not spend 3-4 weeks collating and collecting all that data only to start with my next S&OP cycle again. You're wanting to improve that planning cycle capability. One of the ways we can do it is with the rapid segmentation capabilities. Now, the benefits of doing this are that I can quickly set up exceptions to look out for my high value, high volume items, set up automated processes where I can group which items have higher volatility, which items are higher with higher demand patterns, that sort of thing. So what I can essentially do is segment my entire business and then create different engine profiles for my forecasting so that I can treat those items differently. I can include the exception planning. I can also then automate that particular process. The collaboration visibility I was mentioning earlier. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of companies are facing the challenge where they don't have the visibility even for their current supply chain, let alone looking out past their tier 1 and tier 2. What we can do with this is using a common platform. I can then have visibility into the inventory of my tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier N supplies. In terms of inventory visibility, I can get my suppliers to actually commit to what they're going to be supplying, not only my tier 1, but my tier 2 and tier 3 as well. So I have visibility in terms of, when I have my S&OP process, I need to know when I come up with a plan, what is the likelihood of it actually happening? What is the likelihood of that particular plan being realized? Because if I don't have visibility in terms of my suppliers or their suppliers, there's a lot of risk in that particular process. So, other things I just wanted to mention also is the ability to not only understand if my suppliers are committing to their supplies, but also are my customers. Am I looking at my customer demand and have the ability to actually get the customers to confirm what they're going to be ordering? So on both sides, not only getting my supply visibility, but also my demand visibility. And then the next stage is well, where is S&OP going? I mentioned that AI and machine learning, Internet of Things are going to be disrupting it. So where do we see it going in the future? One of the things that I can see is that companies tend to have a shorter planning cycle. So instead of having a monthly S&OP process, they're potentially having one every 2 months. The next thing is also, as I mentioned with the segmentation capabilities, is instead of having an S&OP meeting for all of my items, have different meeting cycles for different products based on risk, which is the next point, is focusing on risk and that business impact. So instead of having an S&OP meeting once a month, maybe I focus on the items that are causing the greatest risk, but I can't do that if I don't have the visibility of that risk. So that's where we're seeing it going forward. So maybe S&OP going forward is going to be more of a continuous planning process rather than a monthly cycle, so more of an automatable process. But yeah, that's really what I had. I've made up 5 minutes of your time.
Okay. Thanks a lot.